All right, let's dive right in. If you're a student getting ready to jump into a career in data, think of this as your personal field guide. We're going to give you the map to navigate this whole new data landscape so you can walk into your very first job interview feeling like you already know the lay of the land. So, we've broken this down into 5 key stages. First, we'll get the big picture of the new data universe. Then, we'll put together your essential toolkit, the must-have concepts. After that, we'll look at how you'd actually use that toolkit in 3 totally different jobs. Then, we'll cover the new rules of the game. And finally, we'll talk about what it really takes to go from a total rookie to a genuine pro. Okay, let's get into our first section, the new data universe. And here's the main idea. The old maps that people used for data careers, they're basically broken now. The world of data has changed in a really fundamental way, and just understanding this one shift is going to give you a massive leg up on everyone else. And this slide pretty much sums up a huge, long-standing headache. For years, companies had these 2 separate systems. You had a cheap but really chaotic data lake for all the raw, messy stuff, and then a completely separate, super expensive data warehouse for the clean, perfect reports. It was just a constant battle. Well, your future is going to be a whole lot simpler. You'll be working with a data lakehouse, a single system that really gives you the best of both worlds. So let's move on and see how this all builds. We're on to section 2, which I'm calling your modern data toolkit. Seriously, think of these next few slides as your core vocabulary. These are the absolute must-know concepts for any data interview you walk into. Get these down and you're already ahead of the game. So first up, that data lakehouse we mentioned. What exactly is it? Well, it's an architecture that basically lets you have your cake and eat it too. Imagine having one giant library that holds both your raw, scribbled research notes and the perfectly polished, finished books, all in the same building. That's the Lakehouse. It brings the reliability and structure of a traditional warehouse, things like enforcing a schema, which is just a blueprint to keep all your data consistent, and applies it directly to that cheap cloud storage. Okay, next up, data mesh. Now, the single most important thing to remember here is this. A data mesh is not a piece of technology. It's a philosophy. It's about how you organize people. Instead of having one central data team that becomes this huge bottleneck for everyone, a data mesh says, hey, each department, marketing, finance, operations, is responsible for its own data. They own it, they clean it, and they offer it up to the rest of the company as a trustworthy product. And this table just lays out the difference perfectly. The data lakehouse is the what. It's the centralized technology, the platform you build on. The data mesh is the how. It's the decentralized way you organize your teams. And here's the kicker. They're not mutually exclusive. You can absolutely have a data mesh running on top of a single data lakehouse. One is about unifying your tech. The other is about scaling your people. Finally, in your toolkit, you need to understand the format wars. You can think of this as the actual DNA of your data. On one side, you've got Apache Iceberg, which is kind of like the Switzerland of formats. It's open, it's neutral, and it plays nicely with pretty much everybody. On the other side, you've got Delta Lake, the performance king, especially if a company is all in on the Databricks and Spark ecosystem. A company's choice here tells you a lot about their strategy. Do they value flexibility above all else, or are they chasing pure, raw speed? Okay, that's enough theory. Let's get to the fun part. Section 3, choose your first job. This is where we take all those concepts we just talked about and see how they actually play out in the real world, in the kinds of companies you might end up working for. First up, Scenario A, the high-growth startup. This is a classic place to start your career. You're on a tiny team, maybe it's just you and one other person. The company is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour and everybody needs data, like yesterday. The biggest problem is just pure chaos. Finance and marketing have different answers to the same simple question, and you are just drowning in one-off requests from everyone. So what's the solution? It's something called the modern data stack. It's basically a recipe that's built for speed and agility. You use automated tools like Fivetran to just pull data in. You run it all on a cloud warehouse like Snowflake that pretty much manages itself. You use a tool called DBT to define all your business rules in a clean, version-controlled way. And then you just plug in a simple dashboarding tool so people can finally start answering their own questions. All right, let's move on to Scenario B, the mid-market retailer. This company made it through that startup phase, but now they're facing some real grown-up problems. Their cloud bill is just exploding, and bad data is causing actual real-world consequences, like empty shelves in their stores. Plus, they have this extra headache of mixing old, on-premises systems with all their new cloud data. Their solution is to bring in a lot more structure with a centralized lakehouse, often on a platform like Databricks. They've kind of outgrown that startup approach of just piecing together a bunch of different tools. Now they need one unified platform to manage both the complexity and the cost. And they'll use something called the Medallion Architecture. This is a super important concept to bring order to the chaos. Raw data lands in the bronze layer, it gets cleaned up and validated in the silver layer, and then it's aggregated for business users in the gold layer. This process is a game changer for data quality, and it lets them get their costs under control. And finally, Scenario C, the regulated government entity. Okay, here the rules of the game are completely different. We're talking about petabytes of incredibly sensitive citizen data, let's say in a country like Saudi Arabia, which has extremely strict data laws. The number one priority isn't speed or even cost, it's security, and making sure that data never, ever leaves the country. The solution here is pretty sophisticated. They use a data mesh to decentralize ownership so security doesn't become this massive bottleneck. They deploy their entire platform on what's called a sovereign cloud, which is physically located within the country's borders. And they use an open format like Apache Iceberg as a kind of common language, so all the different departments can share data securely, even if they're all using different tools. This brings us perfectly to Section 4, the new rules of data. And I want to be really clear, this isn't the boring part. This is the stuff that protects your company from getting hit with massive fines, and honestly, it's what separates the true professionals from the amateurs. So here's the biggest takeaway for you. Data privacy laws aren't just for the legal department anymore. Not at all. Regulations like GDPR over in Europe have become fundamental engineering constraints. They literally dictate how you have to build your data platform from the very first day. Understanding these rules is now a core technical skill, period. And here's a super practical checklist of what that actually means. For localization, you use those sovereign cloud regions. For encryption, you're using a key management service. For access control, you use role-based access control and multi-factor authentication to enforce what's called the least privilege principle, which just means people can only see the absolute minimum they need to do their jobs. And for auditability, you log everything. These are totally non-negotiable. And now for the really cutting-edge stuff. How do these rules apply to generative AI? Well, the risk is fascinating. An AI chatbot could accidentally leak the CEO's salary if it pulls information from a confidential HR file to answer a simple question. The solution is something called permissions-aware retrieval, which means the system is smart enough to check if you are allowed to see that file before it ever lets the AI model read it. This is a huge and very active area of innovation right now. And that brings us to our final section, from rookie to pro. We've talked about the landscape, the tools, and the rules. Now let's talk about the mindset and the habits that will actually accelerate your career. The first big concept here is data ops. This is all about shifting your thinking from just being a data person to being a data software engineer. It means you're applying all the best practices from the software world, like heavy automation, rigorous testing, and CI/CD, to make your data pipelines faster, more reliable, and just better. And this is how the best teams actually measure their success. They use what are called DORA metrics. Basically, how often do you ship new updates? How fast can you go from someone asking for something to that data actually being available? When you do make a change, how often does it break something? And most importantly, how quickly can you fix it when it does? These are the stats that really define a high-performing data team. And finally, to really truly become a pro, you have to learn to think like a business owner. This is a practice called FinOps. See, in the cloud, every single query costs money, and it is shockingly easy to run up a massive, unexpected bill. The pros learn to control these costs. They tag everything so they know exactly who spent what, they automatically shut down resources that aren't being used, and they get clever about using cheaper computing options for jobs that can be interrupted. I'm telling you, this skill alone will make you invaluable. So, there you have it. The modern data landscape, the tools you need to get around, and the mindset to truly succeed. We've basically given you the map and the toolkit for your big adventure. The only question left is, where are you going to explore first?